For this story, we have to make a change to the timeline. The coordinates inscribed within the walls of the Forerunner structure under Sword Base were for Installation 05 instead of Installation 04. We will see how this changes a familiar story. Right off the bat, the timeline changes because the fleet of Particular Justice that chased the Pillar of Autumn arrived at Halo before the Pillar. Because of their faster slip space drives, that means that Thelvadami, the Supreme Commander, would arrive and argue with the Lord Prophet about who's in jurisdiction. Originally, the Covenant start to land on Halo right away, as they wait for the Pillar of Autumn to arrive. 343 Guilty Spark prepares the ring's defenses, but eventually decides not to fire on them because of the Autumn. I think we immediately see a change here. Though it would take a different amount of time for both UNSC and Covenant to get to the installation, for the time being, we will consider it the same amount as in Combat Evolved. This time, the Covenant tried to land on the ring, but the ring's defenses are activated on them, simply because the ring already has an outbreak of flood. And before being captured by the Gravemind, 2401 Penitent Tangent would have had time to put the ring on full alert. You're probably wondering, why didn't this happen in Halo 2? We have no indication that it didn't happen, though we do know the entire ring's sentinels and automated systems are dealing with the containment of the flood outbreak. The outer defenses of the ring could easily target the approaching Covenant, in this case, making it very difficult to land on the ring since it's on site. Thelvadam and the Prophet of Stewardship fight about who's in control, but with the ring being hostile, the Prophet uses it to manipulate the elites. He tells them the gods are angry at Thel for trying to usurp his power. With no way to deny that claim, Thel relinquishes control to the Minor Prophet and the Pillar of Autumn arrives. The ring's defenses don't do much in the way of protecting the ring, as we know several species have landed on at least one ring before and lived to fly away. That means the defense systems must not be very useful in its entirety. The ring would attack the Covenant to prevent them from landing, but they land anyway. Now with them believing it's the wrath of the gods because they didn't wait for the prophets to arrive to begin the great journey, the Covenant here is demoralized. More so when the humans arrive, and because the ring doesn't attack them, and the Prophet won't open fire in any large scale, the Pillar of Autumn once again manages to damage and destroy several ships. The Covenant would be worse off this time around, as both with the ring attacking them and the Prophet being in command instead of Thel, the naval battle goes worse for the Covenant. However, ultimately the same fate happens. The Autumn crash lands on the ring and the humans scatter about. One important thing, however, I think the humans on board the Pillar of Autumn definitely stall out for more time before their crash landing and evacuation. So the Onsuna that follows Captain Keyes and captures him never manages to get onto Keyes' escape vehicle. I think the amount of time he would be exposed to just being around on the bridge makes it so Chief sees him when he goes to the bridge. That means Keyes is not captured when they land on the ring, and instead they can focus on establishing Alpha Base and rescuing all the troopers that escaped. I also think that since they had more time before they had to crash the Autumn, it would have been closer to the ring, therefore making it easier on the dropouts to get on the ring. More people survive and makes Alpha Base a little stronger with biomass, that is. Right off the bat, we would know there's a giant shield on one section of the ring, since during their arrival, Cortana would have spotted it with her scans. Though they have no idea why it's here, they think they should stay clear of it. For now anyway, as the Covenant are very intent on getting inside, but have no leads on how, and no reason to know the Index exists either. They're trying to break in, but fail with the Sentinels attacking them. They could launch a full-scale attack, but the Sentinels are creations of the Forerunners, so they don't want to do that unless they have to. They chalk it up to once again the ring not finding them worthy to start the great journey, and want to wait for High Charity to come with all the prophets. In the meantime, they have lost a lot of forces because of the Prophet's inability to properly lead, and they lost a lot to both the Sentinels and the UNSC. Plus, the UNSC is just strengthening their position. A few of the transmissions Cortana keeps intervening with describe how Halo is going to control the fate of the universe, so they plan to find out what the Covenant are hereafter and why they're so intent in getting inside the shield. With Penitent Tangent being captured by the Gravemind, however, they are unable to make contact with the Sentinels or the Monitor. Captain Keyes had the Master Chief and Silva work together to figure out what the Covenant are doing and sends them out while he takes care of Alpha Base. They will hit two different sites. One will be here where the Covenant are trying to break in from, and the other will be this so-called Cartographer, where Cortana believes it will help them map out the ring and see what its purpose is. In the meantime, Silva takes a bunch of ODSTs and Marines to attack the Covenant location, but we find out it's kinda desolate and demolished. We jump to the Arbiter's point of view where the Prophet is yelling at him, telling him to redeem himself. He has to find a way inside the shield. He plans to go down to the ground and join his elite squad of Sanhili to get the shields down when they run into the flood. those who manage to escape the shield set up by the Sentinels. Their forces begin to be absolutely wrecked by the flood at first, but they rally back and manage to push back the flood and eradicate them. Everything looks like it's going to work out, but they will have to wait for High Charity. That is when the shields deactivate and the floods start pouring out. Then it's all hands on duty for the Covenant to stop the spread of the flood and their infection. We also find out that the reason the shield was deactivated was because Silva took some soldiers inside. As a reclaimer, the Sentinels guided him to deactivate it, with the intent of rescuing the Monitor and getting the Index to fire the ring. Though he wasn't made aware of all the reasons why, he just got all excited when he heard he was a reclaimer and had the authority to bring down the shields. Silva and his ODSCs make their way to the Index with the help of the Sentinels. Thelvaram is planning to go down to the surface again and lead a team that will lock down the flood and stop them once and for all, especially since they're trying to get the flood off the Truth and Reconciliation. Instead, he hears that the demon is on the ring, and he's tearing his way through the guards at the Cartographer and is making his way to the control room. So he sends Ratas to fight the humans and Flood, because even in all the chaos, they can't allow the humans to have control of the sacred icon, and he will get to the demon, the Master Chief. The fight on the ring is horrible, lots of UNSC casualties, and the infection spreads to Alpha Base. Keyes and Johnson make it out alive but barely, and have to be on the run while they contact Chief. But he is in a blocked zone and doesn't get their signals. He reaches the control room to be ambushed by Thel, since he's the only one that survived the release of the Flood and his group. He fights the Chief but ends up losing, and Chief kicks him off the walkway in the control room. He falls and falls until he is caught by the Gravemind. Chief plugs Cortana onto the control room. She tells him what the ring is gonna do if it's activated and what happened to Alpha Base. Since Silva's ODSTs have begun to be infected, the Flood knew of Alpha Base and went after them. So Chief has to choose between helping Silva get the Index so they can activate the ring, or going to help Keyes and Johnson as they make the last-ditch effort with the survivors of Alpha Base to get to the Pillar of Autumn. They want to get to a Pelican or an Albatross or anything that could get them off the ring. They think that they can try to stow on board a Covenant ship, considering how the Covenant is so focused on fighting the Flood. Chief decides his best chance is to get to Silva and help him get the Index, so it doesn't fall in Covenant hands, or else they might wipe out all life in the galaxy. He trusts Johnson can keep Keyes safe, at least while he completes his mission. So he calls Foehammer, who is barely managing to stay alive after the whole mess that's going on all over the ring. Since he is going to the Index, and the Gravemind can't risk them activating the ring, especially since the Gravemind would know about the tactical pulses, he has the Monitor Penitent Tangent explain to Thel what the ring does, and that their great journey is a lie. He doesn't believe it and wants to free the Monitor, aka the Oracle. But since he can't, he just has to listen to the Gravemind. The Gravemind instead sees Thel is not ready for the truth and teleports him to the library, where the humans are getting the Index. That way, he can redeem himself. Thel listens to that logic, and when he gets teleported to the library, he fights his way up. Though most of the Flood don't fight him, they stay out of his way. There are some Flood forms to slow him down. The Gravemind is toying with him because he doesn't want him to succeed too fast. If he does and gets the Index too quickly, he might regroup with Ratas and get out of there to lead the Covenant force and put up a serious opposition against the Flood. By the time Thel gets to Silva, he's about to get to the Index, but without the Monitor there, he stows it on his chest compartment when Ratas ambushes him. The fight is kind of even, but with Thel, they beat the ODSCs and kill Silva, not knowing they can't use the Index without the humans. Seeing this, the Gravemind has his Flood forces focus on attacking them now, but Chief has finally arrived to the library. He fights his way up the library, but by the time he gets to the top, the Covenant are leaving and taking the Index. Instead, he has to fight his way out, because the Flood now have no reason to hold back. Cortana says they can't allow the Covenant to fire the ring. They're gonna have to blow it up. Chief agrees. He needs to get to the captain so they can get his neural codes to blow up the Autumn. In the meantime, Johnson and Keyes are barely managing to outrun the Flood while making their way through the Autumn. The Covenant forces watching the Pillar of Autumn are all dead and infected, and most of the Covenant have pulled out to regroup and plan to fight the Flood until High Charity arrives. Chief finally arrives on the Autumn just in time to save Johnson. Keyes and like 4 Marines left out of the 1,100 people on board the Autumn. They're the only survivors. He has Keyes given the codes so he can detonate the ship, while Johnson and the Marines head to the vehicle bay and wait for him. They need to clear out a longsword, which they will use to try to get on board a damaged Covenant ship. Maybe use its slip space drive to get back to Reach and buy themselves some more time. The explosion on the ring should catch any of the Covenant unprepared and off guard to damage or blow up their ships, and it should put an end to the flood. Meanwhile, Thelvadam gets to his ship where the Prophet has been commanding from. He removes him from power and tells him he saw an oracle, Penitent Tangent, and he will try to rescue him. The Prophet gets real mad because if that does happen, Thel will certainly have more power than him. He tries to take control back and Thel ends up killing him. No one questions the Supreme Commander, but they know if he did it without the best reason, Thel is already a dead man. While he's dealing with the rest, he considers the truth and reconciliation being taken over by the flood. But since this all happened much faster than in the original timeline because of the widespread of flood, I don't think the ship would be ready and fixed so Thel wouldn't have to worry about it too much. He does try to send a team to clean it out and another to retake the human ship. He may be spreading his forces out a little thin, but now that he's in command, he knows he can handle it. That's when the forces on the Pillar of Autumn inform him that the chief is there and plans to blow up the ring, but it's too late. They die to the chief and he sets up the reactors to blow up, escaping Halo without them knowing. In the few minutes that he has left, Thel pulls out his forces, whatever he can at least, and focuses on no flood ships escaping or getting on board, but isn't successful as there's way too much damn flood. Chief and the UNSC survivors have to get on board one of the damaged ships, clear out the flood and Covenant that are still alive and gain control to take the ship back to Reach. The chief considers going through with Operation Red Flag, but as a single Spartan with a captain, a sergeant, and a handful of Marines, he doesn't think it will be successful. Instead, they do end up going back to Reach. Thel tries to remote activate the self-destruct, but Cortana stops it. Instead, he sends 2 ships to follow, since he barely had any left. Those ships being the Heretics, and Thel will deal with whatever flood is on the remaining ships while they wait for High Charity to arrive. In the meantime, Chief and Johnson barely manage to make it off Halo, back to Reach, and keep Keyes alive. While in slip space, Cortana makes sure there's no flood left on board, but sees the Covenant are chasing them. They land the ship and hide out, stopping the Covenant from tracking them down, while they pick up the humans and Spartans that survived. This is where basically First Strike happens all over again. Almost exactly the same, to be honest, except this time Keyes is alive, reunited with Halsey, and they get off the unyielding Hierophant. Now, I could see Keyes here sacrificing himself instead of Admiral Whitcomb in order to make sure they can buy them enough time to blow up the Hierophant, but just for the sake of fun, and you can crucify me for this one, it's one of the only choices I've ever taken just for fun. Let's keep Keyes alive. I do kill him in every scenario after all. When Keyes and Chief get back to Earth, that pretty much plays out the same. What we should focus on in the meantime is Thelvadam and the containment of the flood. Though he could not stop the explosion of the ring, he managed to keep the flood on the ring, and that blew them up, including the Gravemind. However, as we saw with the explosion of the first ring, shards remain, and some of those shards remain flood infested, which meant Thelvadam couldn't pursue this stolen Covenant craft that escaped the system. They have to wait until the Heretic comes back to Reach to explain that they lost the humans and the ship. Thel is in a terrible position now. Not only did he fail to get the stolen ship back and fail to stop the destruction of the Holy Ring, but he usurped power from the Minor Prophet. Though some of the elites who are experienced commanders know if he hadn't taken command, the Prophet would have caused the flood to spread in its entirety, and the containment would have failed. They don't say anything because the loss of a halo is a huge blow to the Great Journey. They may have possession of a sacred icon, aka the Index, but that's not gonna help them without a halo. Thel also tells them about the Gravemind creature, and they don't truly believe him, especially when he says the creature had control of the Monitor, aka the Oracle. They throw him in prison and cast him down, strip him of his armor, and we all know how that goes. He ends up becoming Arbiter, but before that happens, the Heretic and his ships, as well as Ratas, are sent to the surface of the rings, shattered parts, to exterminate the flood. Or what remains of them anyway. They take heavy casualties, as the Prophet of Truth intended, since he wants to get rid of anyone who is loyal to Thelvadam. On the surface of the ring, they find a lot of interesting things, kinda indicating there's no great journey after all, pointing to them not being worthy of being reclaimers. But they keep this to themselves. It goes against everything they believe after all. Instead, we return back to Earth when Regret attacks Earth to get to the undercity of Mombasa. He wants the coordinates for the ring, and since we replaced Installation 04 with 05, we would be getting the coordinates to Alpha Halo this time. The beginnings of Halo 2 is pretty much the same, except Keyes is in command of a brand new ship. Let's call it the UNSC Midnight Coup. He follows the solemn penance to Installation 04, where a very similar beginning to Halo CE happens, along with mixtures of Halo 2. The Covenant don't want to harm the Sacred Ring, but they have to deal with humanity. Though just like Miranda Keyes stays hidden with the Covenant in Halo 2, so does Jacob Keyes. They are also very wary of the Flood, because their experience with the Flood on the first ring was far more extensive than in the original timeline. Chief and Johnson lead Marines down to the surface to get to the control room and the library of Halo. Unlike in the original, where they had a small clue of what was happening, this time they have a pretty good idea, and it's just one Covenant ship. Huge one, but still. Chief knows what he's doing. Keyes does too. Their plan is to get to the library, get the index, so the Covenant can't fire the ring. Even though at this point Cortana basically knows the Covenant won't be able to fire the ring since they aren't reclaimers, that's still a point floating around. No one has really discussed that they are the Forerunner's chosen people. So Chief goes to the library fully expecting the Flood, and Johnson is sent to the control room to lock it down. The Covenant have the index from the previous Halo still, and if they can use it here, they could wipe out humanity. Keyes is in the meantime scouting the rest of the ring and keeping a low profile, ready to detonate all the nukes on board in case they find the Flood or the Covenant get control of the ring. When Chief arrives to the library, he makes contact with Guilty Spark. This time around, he's greeted, and Chief is still a bit confused with all the Reclaimer talk. But now that they have experience with the previous ring, Cortana walks him through what they need to do to get the index. Spark is super hesitant at first. The Halo is not a toy or a weapon to be wielded lightly, but he is so happy to finally see the firing of the rings worked. He talks non-stop, annoying Chief and Cortana, and wants to give them a tour of the ring. He even teleports Chief back to the entry of the library to slow him down from getting the index, because without a containment breach, they should not be there. That is until the Covenant do breach the containment and release the Flood. Now it has become clear to Guilty Spark he has a problem, and he takes Chief and Cortana through the library. They fight a few infected forms towards the end, but nothing Chief can't handle, especially with his new Mjolnir. Once they get the index, they teleport to the control room, where they scare the hell out of Johnson as they appear out of thin air. There is bodies all over the place, and it's clear the Covenant have been trying to get into the control room, until Chief arrives and helps them push the Covenant back. Guilty Spark is insistent they activate the ring and stop the Flood from spreading, but they already know what Halo does, so they refuse. He says he will kill them and activate the ring with the help of another Reclaimer, but they tell him that's not gonna happen. They can contain the Flood. They did it on the other ring, and they can do it here again. After they tell Guilty Spark that they blew up Installation 05 and the strength of the Flood there, he's convinced the ring has to be fired, especially since he's the Monitor and is fully aware what's going on outside and how bad the Covenant is doing against the Flood they themselves released. This is finally when High Charity arrives, and now the Monitor is downright pissed, saying how there is billions of bodies for the Flood to take over, and he won't allow it. The Master Chief tells him that if he doesn't give him the index back, he will have to destroy Spark. Guilty Spark tells him if he does that, he will lose the index forever. So Chief comes back at him by saying the Covenant have one. He'll just take the one they got from Installation 05, and the Monitor laughs, calling him a fool. 343 Guilty Spark explains that the index from the installation over there won't work here. When Chief hears that, he makes his mind up and points his weapon at the Monitor. If the Covenant's index won't work here, and the index for the installation will be lost, then they have to destroy the Monitor. Now with the arrival of High Cherry and the entire Covenant Armada, Johnson says maybe they should activate the ring. If there's any way to make it fire a less powerful wave of destruction, this way they could wipe out the entire Covenant and the Flood. The Monitor explains that is possible, but highly irresponsible. Chief plugs Cortana into the control room console to start prepping the ring, and Guilty Spark is very willing to comply with that part of the plan. He says it's regretful that the Pulse will kill all the Reclaimers on Halo, but they can still keep in contact, and he will expect them when they return to the ring. In the meantime, he plans to come through all the human knowledge on board the Midnight Coup. Johnson volunteers to activate the ring, telling Chief there's no other way. The UNSC is gonna need him if his plan doesn't work. That's when Keyes interrupts. He says they can't commit genocide. Not on this scale. Even if the Covenant is doing the same to them, they aren't monsters. This war can be won by other means. They end up not activating a tactical pulse, but with the arrival of hundreds if not thousands of Covenant ships and led by the new Arbiter, the Covenant are knocking down their door at the control room. There's a pretty extensive battle in the control room, even as the Monitor is trying to tell them that humans are rightful Reclaimers. There's being a second Oracle to say the same thing, Thel is distraught. The signs and evidence are too clear. Nothing in the ring responds to them, but humans have a free pass to all Forerunner technology. He decides it is worth to listen to the humans for a second. That pisses off the brutes and the prophets watching from High Charity. Truth and Tartarus enacts their plan to betray the elites, and the Great Schism starts to happen. Now with thousands of brutes coming and nowhere to run, the Monitor instead teleports them to the Midnight Coup, including the Arbiter and his forces. Keyes is freaking out a little bit about this alliance just because they teleported straight to his bridge, but quickly forms a friendship with Thelvanam as captain to shipmaster. I guess friendship is a strong word here, but they become allies seeing as the prophets have shown their hand. They were liars all this time and they were just waiting for a moment to cast down the elites. This time, however, the brutes did not have a lot of time to prepare their betrayal of the elites, and instead, they're faring far worse against them. That is until the Prophet of Regret really regrets his choices. He knows there's no way for him to get back to High Charity alive since he is on board an elite ship. And like the master manipulators that the prophets are, he convinces the elites that believe in the great journey to rally to his side. After all, he has always had a good relationship with them. This makes everything far worse though, since the elites were doing a good job at shutting down the brutes at Schism. But now that factions are split into three, the brutes plus Truth and Mercy, and the elites that still believe the great journey plus regret, and the Arbiter and the elites that are doubtful of the great journey plus the ones that simply want payback and revenge for the betrayal of the prophets and brutes. The Arbiter's group is split off to make sure the Flood are contained, while Truth and Mercy run to Earth, like in the original, except Mercy is still alive for now. Regret and his fleet flee, somewhere unknown for now, to regroup, and the Arbiter has most of his remaining fleet stay here to deal with the possible escape of Flood, and the traitor brutes that didn't get to escape with the Prophet of Truth. Arbiter takes his Shadow of Intent with Ratas back to Earth, and we're back on track for Halo 3, with some huge exceptions for later down the line. Halo 3 goes down almost beat by beat for the first few missions, except when the portal is dug up and opened, no Flood arrive. The elites on Alpha Halo have done a great job at containing the Flood, and it wasn't a problem as serious to begin with. Chief and Arbiter head through the portal with Keyes, and this time Miranda's in amber clad as well. They reach the other side just an hour or so after the Prophets and Brutes, because this time they didn't have to stay back and take care of the Flood, nor glass half of Africa. With Keyes handling the situation, Lord Hood believes they can pull off this alliance and lets them go without much trouble. That being said, he still wants to keep most of his forces on Earth because a few Covenant ships are still popping in and out. The long-range parties that were separated can still pack some damage on Earth and even follow them to the portal. Meanwhile, when the Prophets arrive, they set up all over the Ark like regular, except not really. They don't have much time to prepare before the Human Elite Alliance shows up behind them. With the Arbiter's help, they go through the same events as Halo 3, but much faster and easier. No stalling with the giant shield that protects the Citadel where all the rings can be fired. Also this time, Truth and Mercy plan on using some captured humans from Earth to open the portal instead of capturing Johnson. I've always hated that. If Johnson had died, they had no backup plan. They really wanted to fail. Chief and the Arbiter fight through the brutes and stop Mercy and Truth from firing the rings, and finally find the Ark is making a replacement Halo. With the Prophets dead and the death of the Brute Covenant, the war comes to an end. Guilty Spark gets to return to his ring, and now there is a big setup for Human Elite Alliance on the ring, the Ark, and the Onyx Shield world. Overall, the relationship with the elites is very much more advanced because of the respect between Arbiter and Keyes. But the Sinhili are overall a good margin weaker. See, with the Prophet of Regret still being alive, a lot of elites rally to his faction side. Those who still believe in the Great Journey and are too stubborn to see the truth, especially since the thousands and thousands of years of believing in it, and their entire society being structured that way. High Charity is a mess. Prelates have locked themselves down, and they are formidable warriors. Except without the Forerunner keyship to power the floating city, it's hard for it to maintain itself, even with the thousands of engineers on board. The Prelates hold out for a long time. I'm talking over a year to clear out all of High Charity. So with that distraction in mind, humanity and the Elite Alliance fall behind to regret strengthening his forces. Everything kicks up to 11 though, because now the Covenant is broken. The Banished are becoming more of a threat. Atriox and his people keep on raiding Covenant, UNSC, and elite supplies, essentially weakening all factions at the same time. Oni is holding back on their plans to support the elite separatists because they are very much so still Covenant, and that would not bode well if they won the arms race against the Arbiter and his forces. The UNSC unveils the Infinity and begin to rebuild. At this point, things begin to take and reshape into the years between Halo 3 and 4, but Regret is out there with his Covenant. So it's not really separate offshoot like the Storm Covenant was. This is still a very strong empire, so we don't get Jul Mdama. Well, I think we would probably get him as a general of sorts, but to be honest, Jul Mdama wasn't a great warrior or tactician. He just had terrible luck that did a 180-degree turn when he discovered Requiem and the Didact. He wasn't special. I think he would still be a shipmaster and very devoted to Regret, but the Covenant are like an eighth their strength from before, maybe less. And it seems like a matter of time before they fail altogether. The Prophet is still trying to find other Halos because he can't exactly go to the two that had been found already, or he might die fighting the Human and Elite Alliance. On the other hand, humanity's finding new Halos to try to decommission them. That's how they run into the Composer, and the same deal happens. Some scientists get composed, and the Infinity has to be sent out to get to Requiem. Now, as far as the Master Chief and Blue Team go, they're doing missions non-stop. I don't think they're on the Infinity when this happens. In this timeline with Keyes alive, I think he would have talked Halsey out of using another clone for new Cortana and helped Chief understand that AIs have a natural lifespan that has to end. And since they didn't get frozen in space for 4 years, it's okay to let Cortana go. I do think they might pair him and the rest of Blue Team with new AIs, but Cortana would be gone. Another thing, Keyes would probably be an admiral now. At first I thought maybe Miranda would be the second officer on board the Infinity, but that's really not like her, playing second fiddle to anyone else. That's just not her style. And Keyes wouldn't be the captain of the Infinity here, because Del Rio was kind of signed up to be the captain for years before it was ready. Keyes would have been on board during the blooding years to make peace talks on San Helios, the inauguration of the Spartan 4 program, and the unveiling of the Infinity itself. Another point I would like to make is that High Charity still exists. I think that would be the Arbiter's center of command. Now I know some of you won't like this, but the Arbiter can only hold so much power and political influence. The Kydons on San Helios, as I bring up in every story, they are assholes. They won't let him be in command. And with Regret still alive, I think San Helios itself is lost to the Arbiter. Regret took their side and filled their minds with more bullshit and poison. They still believe in the Great Journey. That being said, a lot of elites were present that day, and the fight on High Charity, and a good chunk of the colonies, especially the ones not directly influenced by Regret, have begun to turn, or outright stop believing in the Covenant. Really, the biggest change in this what if is the entire Covenant and elite structure and story. It may be because I kept Regret alive, but I don't think Keyes would have sent Chief to assassinate the Prophet when the Flood could have been a bigger concern. That and the possibility of firing the rings. Well, now, once we get back to Requiem, we also find out that since the other semi-known shield worlds were under the Arbiter's control, like Refuge, where the Covenant separatists went into hiding, the Covenant decided to move in full force to Requiem to avoid the same thing. When Infinity arrives, Requiem scans them, and it begins to open up. Now, that might seem like both a good and a bad thing, but well, the Infinity arrived here to an entire armada of Covenant. Though the Covenant aren't as strong as they used to be, it's the Infinity and its few support ships versus 40 plus ships. Del Rio is gonna get them all killed until Requiem opens and they all get pulled in. That buys the Infinity some time, but it's in a bad shape, and all Del Rio wants to do now is run away. With the opening of Requiem, the Covenant send out a signal to San Helios to get the Prophet of Regret from there, because they found out that Didact is there, though in his own prison that can't be opened without a Reclaimer. They still believe the so-called Reclaimers would be prophets. And since the fall of High Charity, there's no prophets left besides, as we know, the ones hiding and Regret. Yes, the Covenant believe all who are worthy, so just themselves, are Reclaimers, not just the prophets. But they would try to open the Didact scriptum, and once unsuccessful, they would believe only the Prophet would know how. This is where they fucked up. The entire Covenant would move from San Helios to Requiem, kind of forsaking all who wouldn't come. This gives Thalvadim the opportunity to move into San Helios and take control of the elite race. But that does mean the Covenant on Requiem are getting stronger, because there is a lot of Forerunner weapons and tech on Requiem. Though at the same time there is Promethean Knights, so they start to lose a lot of troops to gain control of the artifacts and weapons. Now, since the Infinity did manage to shut down the gravity well and escape out of Requiem, they went back to Earth. Keyes removes Del Rio from being in charge and puts on his captain's uniform, saying he will pilot this baby out himself. Lord Hood suggests giving Miranda command. He is an admiral after all, but Keyes believes that would be seen as nepotism, so he refuses. Miranda will come with him though, as they plan to take a fleet back to Requiem and take it from the Covenant. With the Arbiter's help, they can put an end to the Covenant once and for all. This is where Blue Team, and I think a couple more Spartan 2s and 3s get involved. They will be needed on the ground, especially to find and kill Regret to end the Covenant. The joint forces of the UNSC and Arbiter take the fight to the Covenant on Requiem, and while the naval battle is going on, the ground battle is kinda tough. With the new Promethean weapons and having plenty of time to entrench themselves, the Covenant are giving the ground team a tough time. I think the Prophet would be hiding where the Librarian's Matrix is at, and having a bunch of his forces at the Didact's cryptum. The last of the Covenant AIs are all attacking the Librarian's replica matrix to try to unlock her, so the Prophet can speak to her and figure out how to release the Didact. Though the Covenant AIs are weaker than humans, if Dr. Glassman could figure out in one afternoon, the Covenant AIs would figure it out in a couple of weeks, maybe months, that they had time to prepare on Requiem. The security system to release the Librarian's replica is much less powerful than the Didact's sealed cryptum, so that's where I think it would have all started. When they finally unlock the Librarian's AI imprint, she tells them they won't be able to release the Didact, only the true Reclaimers can. She refuses to tell them anything else, but it kinda breaks the spirit of the Covenant forces there. Regret can see in their eyes that they are ready to be done with the Covenant and the Great Journey, so he leaves them and has them all executed as heretics. When Blue Team arrives, it's just a bunch of bodies. They arrive with the Arbiter and a couple of elites. The dying elites reveal what happened and that Regret is going to the cryptum to unlock it. Now they understand why some of the Covenant were taking human prisoners instead of killing them like usual. They plan to release the Didact. With the release of the Librarian though, she joins them to tell them who the Didact is and what he wants, as well as what he's capable of. Blue Team could track Regret down to the cryptum, and with the Arbiter and his forces' help, they would cut through the Covenant. They would get there just a bit late as the Prophet releases the Didact through a very unwilling captured human soldier. When the Didact is released, it seems like the battle is about to turn on the Covenant's favor, with all the Prometheans, but I think Regret would at first be in shock to having a living god among them, but immediately try to give him orders to kill the humans. He sees it as if he can command the Didact for releasing him. The Didact would force choke the Prophet and snap his long-ass neck in half. He would see humanities there, aka the ones he hates, and the elites, a couple of grunts and hunters. He would be a bit surprised to see they're working together, but seeing as how there's a lot of forces there, he would get in his cryptum and try to take over Requiem again. I do think that he is smart, and he was the best warrior the Forerunners had after all, but he would underestimate his opponents. The human fleet and the Arbiter's fleet, though still in combat with what little remains of the Covenant, would have enough strength to fight him. Here's something to differentiate though. I don't think they give him enough time to get to the Mantle's approach, though I believe even if he got to it, there would be just too many forces and he would still face the same outcome. The UNSC and elites would team up to take him down, and I think he has a change of heart. Seeing that humans and elites and a few other races are working together, he ends up having a talk with the replica of the Librarian, where she tells him he has to let go. The age of the Forerunners is over. They must let the galaxy heal and let the new species grow and learn from the mistakes the Forerunners made. The Didact's still hesitant. He says he could never work side by side with them, not after all the warrior servants he lost in the war against humanity, but he will allow them to find their own path. Maybe the mantle of responsibility isn't meant for a single species. Maybe that was the lesson that blinded them. He thinks to himself that if they had teamed up with humanity and the other races of their time to fight the Flood, maybe, just maybe, the Forerunner Empire wouldn't have crumbled and ceased. He gives up. Kinda. Since he knows he can't work with the humans, he doesn't want to live anymore. He will atone for his sins, and he takes his cryptum to the heart of the Covenant fleet. The cryptum begins to glow an intense orange until it turns blue and BAM! Where the cryptum was, now only exists a black hole. It explodes, consuming most, if not all, Covenant ships. The Didact sacrifices himself and the cryptum to restore peace to the galaxy. I think I'm gonna cut it there for now. In the meantime, the galaxy gets to heal somewhat. The elites have a long way to rebuild. They have to regain full control of the colonies Regret had control of, but the alliance with the humans is stronger than ever. After all, the Banished are probably in the best shape of all factions by far though. This does mean the UNSC and Sanheli Alliance now have control of Requiem, High Charity, the Infinity, the Onyx Sphere, Refuge, the Ark, and Installation 04. I think the next step would be telling Guilty Spark about what happened to the Didact, and the one he didn't like at least anyway. The Kaidans and Sanhelios would have to come to terms with the Prophet having abandoned them. The Infinity needs a new captain, which again, Lasky is right there. Miranda gets promoted to full captain. The UNSC mainly have to deal with the fact that the Ark will just make a whole new ring, so decommissioning them is gonna be tricky. Chief and Blue Team talk with the Librarian and find out the true purpose of the Composer about the ancient human war, and I do think overall it's a happier time for humanity. That being said though, the Banished have humans in their ranks, so with this much more access to Forerunner technology around the whole galaxy, it's gonna be a nightmare trying to fight them at every front. the Flood would never have ended up becoming such a huge problem this time around, simply because the big bulk of them got blown up on the ring. I didn't want to make this one as long as it turned out to be, but I feel like there's a lot of things to consider. I dropped Ratas and the Heretic halfway through because I think they would just become high-ranking members of the Arbiter's cabinet. Miranda is great, but that's simply it. With Keys alive here, he's kind of doing what she would do, except better. I think if we were to go forward onto Halo 5 and Infinite, the plot would very much so be like Halo Wars and Infinite, just fighting the Banished wherever they pop up. I think with all the Forerunner tech out there, Atriox would want a Halo just as a way to make sure he can protect himself and have a huge weapon. So maybe a very similar plot to Infinite, and eventually when the crew of the Spirit of Fire reawaken, they would be surprised at Human Elite Alliance. Nothing much more grandiose, maybe the awakening of the Endless Forces, another huge galaxy-wide war, but I would have this turn into a race against time before someone awakens the Flood, hidden somewhere out in the galaxy. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Let me know if you agree or disagree, comment, like, subscribe, all the YouTube business. And hey, join the Discord, see what's coming next. Must warn you, there's a bunch of degenerates there, so good night, Reclaimers.